the situation inside Poland. Thousands of dislodged Poles face an uncertain future in refugee camps in Austria and Italy. Our government has gone a long way to help them by sponsoring immigration for many of them. But unlike the case of the boat people a few years ago, private efforts to help the Poles, including those from the Polish community in Canada, have been sadly lacking. The Trashkirchen refugee camp just outside Vienna. Last summer, when we visited Trashkirchen, more than 20,000 Poles had streamed into Austria to escape the economic misery of their homeland and to avoid the feared crackdown on the Solidarity Union. Asylum formalities are ironed out at this camp, and after screening by the Austrians, the Poles are free to immigrate elsewhere. Tiny, neutral Austria is proud of its tradition of granting asylum to people from East Bloc countries. Dr. Herbert Krizik of the Interior Ministry.
We have a tradition to help people in need, so we are, since the Second World War, one of the important countries of first asylum in Europe.
But because of its small size, Austria cannot absorb the thousands who have flocked to its borders. The refugees spend their time trying to negotiate visas for other countries. At peak times, that is in the times of crisis, the transit areas are packed with people trying to get out. The Austrians provide basic needs to the refugees, but no luxuries. Even at that, the immigrants are a strain on the small country's budget. As with other waves of East Europeans, the Austrians hope the traditional countries of immigration, Canada, Australia, and the United States, will help clear the current Polish logjam. And indeed, Ottawa has put its shoulder to the wheel. Since last summer, it beefed up its immigration staff, and in 1981, more than 2,000 Poles have been brought to Canada under government auspices. But what's been sadly lacking is a private effort on the part of individual Canadians, particularly Polish Canadians. 3 years ago, about half of the 80,000 boat people brought to Canada were brought here by individual or private organizations. Canadian officials are annoyed that in the case of the Poles, only a small number have been brought to Canada by private sponsors. Last month, Immigration Minister Lloyd Axworthy issued a formal statement urging private organizations as well as individuals to respond to the situation.
Well, what is quite clear is that the whole area of private sponsorship hasn't really taken off. We really are at a period when there's, at this point in time, just a little over 250 individuals who've been brought in by private sponsorship. But there hasn't been, I think, the kind of organizational effort, publicity effort, outreach effort to make Canadians aware that there is a very serious refugee problem in the Austrian camps and that they can respond by bringing a refugee to Canada. So that the focus has really been off on the politics in Poland itself, and the refugee side of it has tended to be in the shadows.
You did go to bed at 11 o'clock. Are you very...
English lessons paid for by Ottawa for the Poles brought over by the government, and they also get a small allowance. This group is at Toronto's Seneca College, one of many found across the country. Some of the services that the Polish community does provide and does pay for includes information, counseling, and daycare. But there's been no airlift, no mass sponsorship organized by the Polish community. For some reason, there doesn't seem to be much empathy between the Poles who have been here for some years and those stuck in the Austrian camps. Jan Kashuba, president of the Canadian Polish Congress, feels the government-sponsored program is at least partly responsible.
People are feeling they're being penalized if a family sponsors somebody, you see, he comes over and they have to take the responsibility and the burden of this person. On top of that, they are refused to, for example, English classes or French classes, whatever it may be, which are given to the government-sponsored immigrants. And they know it, you see, and they say, why?
Yeah, but it doesn't seem, sir, that when it comes down to the nitty-gritty of spending some money, that the Polish community in Canada is too quick to sponsor individually.
Well, after all, it is a responsibility. Look, I'm not trying to defend people who can afford and well afford to sponsor someone, but more and more people are coming right now to us. And besides...
But it was slow in coming. And you must admit with me, there are a lot of Poles who I'm sure surprise you by their inability or their lack of desire in helping. Am I right?
I would say that the reality of these immigrants came clearly into focus since December.
December was when military rule was imposed in Poland, and it may lead to more sponsorship. The Poles brought here by the government arrive in staggered batches like this one at Mirabel Airport. Some of them have had a long wait, such as this couple, Marek and Grishina Golik, who we filmed 7 months ago at Trashkirchen camp while they waited for their visa. They married while in the camp. Now, bone-tired from the transatlantic trip, they push their suitcases at Mirabel. After an overnight stay, they will go to Winnipeg. The overnight stay at the Holiday Inn in Montreal is a far cry from the crowded conditions at the Trashkirchen transit area. At the camp, the Austrians take good care of the refugees left behind, but they can't dispel the boredom of waiting.
Many of the people in the camps are pretty highly skilled tradespeople, and many of them come from professional backgrounds. But maybe that's part of the problem. I guess it doesn't have that same human tragedy or poignancy to it. It doesn't seem to be as desperate, and that it's much harder to dramatize the fact that people are sitting in the camps day after day with nothing to do and just total boredom and idleness, as opposed to the more stringent conditions that existed in Southeast Asia during that period of time, so that many of the problems are still there. But it's not of the same technicolor variety of problems that we saw, which were, I think, struck into the hearts of a lot of Canadians.
Lee Sword, here with her husband and 3-year-old son. She is one of the few refugees who speaks English well enough to articulate the frustrations of leaving her homeland. She is a sound engineer and so far has found only part-time work at a Toronto television station. Her husband, an academic, is still learning English. They fled to Sweden, and their immigration to Canada was arranged by Ottawa. You didn't want to leave Poland.
Nobody wants to leave homeland, I don't think. Nobody wants to leave friends and home and family and whatever there is he has. I think that somebody has to be, in a way, forced to start to think of leaving everything and starting all over again in another place, another culture, another country.
But you told me earlier that it's desperation.
People were saying we had a lot of courage to leave our home families and start a new life in a new place, in new environment and culture. That's where it shows that people don't understand, because I think it's not a courage, it's desperation.
So the issue isn't coming to Canada per se, or Australia or South Africa or any of these countries. The issue is to get some freedom into your life so that you can enjoy your work.
Yes, to know that what you do is you want to do it, you doing the way you want to do it, and to just walk straight on with your head high, not being always pressed with the head down and, knowing that you can't do anything about it. Just this is the way it is, and it's going to be, and that's it. You have to take it or leave.
For this exercise of yours to be a success, what would Canada have to give you so that 3 years from now you could say, I've made the right decision? What would you want from Canada?
The possibility of finding the work that I want to do, I enjoy to do, the friends, and the feeling that this is the place where I belong. That's all.
Nothing more?
I think.
You don't think in terms of big cars, swimming pool?
No, it's not that important. I mean, we in Poland are used to having very little comparing to your standard. So I didn't come here to make big money, big living, have a big house and cars and everything. I just came to live.
Without pressure?
Without pressure.
20 years from now, if you were in a position to sponsor some people, and let's say country X is then in a problem and not Poland, would you sponsor people coming to Canada?
I hope I wouldn't change that much.